is a distance in the light, vibrations of a thundercloud. There is a distance in the light, frozen bed of snow-capped heights. There is a distance in the light, vibration of a thundercloud.
Hello, loved ones. This is Matt Stevens, and this is the My Sober Addiction podcast. And we are happy, healthy, wealthy, and free. And I hope you're doing fantastic, loved ones. I am doing pretty well. As of the time of recording this, it is right in the middle of the holiday season. Actually, Christmas is 2 days away as of right now. Now, when you actually listen to this, hey, who knows? But I am a little late getting this out, but well, couldn't help it. We've had a lot of family stuff going on with the holidays, but it's been good. So yeah, and I hope you're thoroughly enjoying your holiday season. Just remember, try to stop anytime you're doing something that's holidays or just any time spent with family. Just remember back on the times when you were in active addiction, kind of like what I spoke about in my last episode. I was saying, during the holidays, it was so hard because a lot of times we would be pressured by family or whatever to maybe go out of town for, go to Aunt Betty's house for Christmas and things like that. And it's like we couldn't back when we were in active addiction. I mean, we couldn't leave the hustle. We couldn't leave the dope man. We had to stay close by and stay on our grind and always be chasing dope. It was, that's one of the things that I look back on during this time of the year, and it reminds me, it's so nice. I can relax, and if we spend the entire day doing holiday things with the family, it's fine. It's whatever. I don't have anywhere to be. I don't have to stay on the hustle. I don't have to do any of those things, and it's amazing. It really is. It's kind of like another thing I have talked about in the past is about like when we are driving down the road and a police car gets behind us. Used to be when we'd see that, we'd be like, oh crap. We start all the evasive driving. We'd dip up in the neighborhood, maybe even pull in some random driveway and act like we live there or whatever, just to kind of shake the cops off our butt, because we know that if they were going to run that license plate, they would probably see that car doesn't have insurance, or the owner of that car doesn't have a license, or maybe even has a warrant or whatever. Point is, back in those days, if the cop got behind us, we got pretty nervous. Now I'm like, whatever, run that plate. I'm good. Everything's good. And in fact, sometimes I even want them to run my plate just so I can see them drive on. They'll kind of hang back behind you, whatever, for 30, 45 seconds or whatever, however long it takes for it to go through. And then they just go on, and it's like, yep, no issues here, my man. So that's always a good feeling. Just like I was saying with the holiday season, or anytime you have things going on like this, where back in the old days of active addiction, we couldn't leave. We couldn't go out of town. We couldn't go on vacation. We couldn't go do this for the weekend or whatever. I mean, unless you are a very highly functioning addict, which I was for a long time. So I'm not talking about the early part, but I'm talking about the later part when you're living out of a hotel and paying their daily thing at a extended stay hotels or whatever. Yep, we don't have to live like that anymore, and it's great, isn't it? It's really nice to kind of think back on those times. Or when we can go to the store and buy gifts for our family, and it's like, oh God, I just dropped, $400 at Kohl's or whatever. I'm not plugging Kohl's or anything here, but just to give you an idea. There was a time in your life, there's no way, man. You couldn't have done that. Even if you had the money, it's like, I can't do that. I got to have it take care of here, and it's an expensive one. Anyway, but it's all about your mindset and kind of staying in that mindset. And it's not a big secret that I've always been big into the Kybalion, which is Hermetic philosophy, that of Hermes Trismegistus. And the principle of polarity, it tells us that everything has an opposite. love is the opposite of hate. Hot, the opposite of cold. Light, the opposite of dark. Just those kinds of things. But they are still on the same scale. In other words, hot and cold are opposite, yes, but they're opposite of the same scale. So if something is cold, but you add a little hot to it, did you make it less cold or more hot? That kind of thing. And then somewhere in the middle, they meet, and at that point, the lines blur so much we can't even tell them apart. And the same is true for addiction. Because especially if you have an addictive tendency, if you just one of those people who are just kind of addictive, and we've talked about this before too, where, we've known people who just don't really get addicted to things like we did, right? They can use drugs and maybe get high, have a little fun on the weekend, and then after it's over, and they go on about their life. And it's like, but us, we're still sitting here like, hey, what do you mean? Yeah, I get it. You got to go to work, but don't you have, we couldn't go anywhere and do anything unless we got high. The principle of polarity teaches us that being sober and being in active addiction are on the same scale. It's like when you are deep in the throes of addiction. It's still on the same scale as sobriety. It's just at the opposite end of it. And what we really have to do is we have to change our mindset from the active addiction side of it and just slide it up the scale to the sobriety side of it. And I know it sounds good. It's like, yeah, Matt, that sounds great in theory. That's a great little meme or a bumper sticker, but I need to apply this in real life, right? Well, that's true. You do. But we do have to change our mindset first. We have to get into the mindset of sobriety. We have to start thinking like a sober person thinks. We have to start acting like a sober person acts. Because one thing that we also do know is that we do live in a physical world, right? So currently we live in a physical world, and that means we have to do physical things. We have to physically get into action. So when we change our mindset, we slide that bar up the scale from active addiction to sober living. When we do that, that's when we need to start taking physical steps to move ourselves in that direction. Usually means checking yourself into a rehab or going to some kind of clinic. I don't judge. If somebody wants to do maintenance meds to get themselves sober, I don't care. You may want to, when you go to meetings, you may want to keep that to yourself, because there are those at some of those organizations who, if you tell them you're on maintenance meds, they'll tell you, they're really snobby about that kind of thing. I call them sobriety snobs, because they're very snobby about their sobriety. And whatever, that's fine. They can do that. We're all on our own path. And if that's what it takes to keep you healthy, to keep you working, to keep you rebuilding your relationships, taking care of your responsibilities, and just living your life, then that's what it takes. Don't worry about what other people say, think, or whatever. That's why I say just keep that to yourself. When you're going to meetings, if you're on maintenance meds, just keep that to yourself. But anyway, getting back to the point. We have to change the mindset. Start thinking like a sober person thinks. What does a sober person think like? Well, what does a sober person do? Well, the first thing you could do would be obviously check yourself into rehab. Yeah. But a sober person also maintains a job. So what would I recommend you do there? I would probably say start downloading apps for finding a job. Start working on your resume. Start doing the things that you would do to get a job. It's like, yeah, but I got to go rehab. So what? Yeah, you do. But that's okay. You can do all of these things. It's kind of like window shopping, right? It's like Kitty and I have a dream of where we want to live in the Caribbean. Okay. So we are looking at houses in the Caribbean. We have apps, and we're always watching something to do with real estate in the Caribbean. That is putting us in that mindset. That's putting us in that state of mind that we are living there. We're actively shopping for a house. Are we really actively shopping right now? Or are we currently looking to buy a house there? No. But we are staying in that frame of mind by window shopping, basically. And also, by the time when the time comes that we actually do make that move, we will be pretty hip to the game and know how things work down there. So that'll be a good thing too. But yeah, start working on the resume and things like that. Do the things that you would do to be getting a job. Just sitting around thinking, I got to get sober, man. I got to get sober. I got to get a job. I got to get my kids back. I got to do this. I got to do. Just sitting around doing that, it's not going to do anything. You have to actually get busy physically. With regards to the Kybalion and Hermetic philosophy, there is the principle of polarity. That's the fourth principle. But the fifth principle is the principle of rhythm. Now, rhythm is like the inflow and outflow. It's like a wave coming in and a wave going out, and coming in and out. There is always a rhythm. The pendulum swings from the left, and then it swings equally as far to the right. It swings back and forth. There's always that rhythm in our lives. And you see, that knowing that can be, at first, it can seem a little bit discouraging. Because it's like, well, if addiction has its own rhythm, like sometimes I'm in active addiction, other times I'm in sobriety, sometimes I'm in active addiction, that would appear to be the case. But when we become conscious of this pendulum swing, when we become conscious of the fact that the principles of polarity and rhythm do apply to us and our addictions, then we can begin to rise above that. Because also, to go along with that, there is what is also referred to in Hermeticism as the Law of Neutralization. Now, Law of Neutralization, an understanding of that is it allows you to rise to a higher plane and escape the swing of the pendulum, that downward swing back into addiction. It's rising above the unconscious plane. Because when we're in addiction, we're very much unconscious, right? You're on 100% on autopilot. That's something that pretty much everybody knows. It's almost like you're not even, the lights are on and nobody's home. You're not even acting consciously. I've even told people, it's like, I've even had my mind made up. Okay, I'm getting sober. Today is the day that I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Today's the day I'm going to start drying out so that I can check myself into a detox facility, because they always want you to come in sick and all that. So anyway, that's beside the point. But the point is, it's like, today is the day that I'm going to do this. Today's the day. But that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm saying. But what I'm actually doing on my phone or whatever, texting the dope man. Maybe I'm hustling up some money. Maybe I'm making moves to actually get dope and get high. But at the same time, I'm saying all those other things. So I'm doing all that unconsciously, completely out of my mind. And I know that we've all done that. We've all said, today's the day, today's the day, today's the day. But what we're actually physically doing is getting the dope. And today's not the day. So we have to get conscious of it. Get conscious of where we are. Get conscious of, I am now in a sobriety mindset. I am now beginning to live a sober life. I am now looking for a job. I am now working a fantastic job, whatever. I am now updating my resume, maybe creating my first resume ever, whatever the case may be for you. Instead of calling the dope man, call a detox facility, see if they've got a bed for you, that kind of thing. We got to take physical steps in that direction so that way we will get there. Because changing your mindset, yes, that's great. But we also have to do physical steps. So the law of neutralization, no, I want to get back to that. Law of neutralization takes us above that pendulum swing. It is a little bit discouraging at first to think, well, if the pendulum swings into addiction this way, Okay, well, the good news is it's going to swing the other way into sober living. That's great. But then when it swings back over to addiction, I don't want to go with that swing. That's where law of neutralization comes in. That's where you consciously become aware of the fact that that pendulum does and will swing. And once you become aware of that, that's when you can rise above it. And you can say, yeah, I'm going to watch that pendulum just swing on by. Because I am now sober. I am living sober. I am living a sober lifestyle. I am now sober. And that applies to every aspect of our life. Once we become aware of the fact that there is polarity, and aware of the fact that there is a rhythm to polarity, where it swings back and forth, and it will forever. But once we become aware of that fact, we become conscious of that fact. That's when we can rise above it. Just kind of imagine yourself, your higher self, kind of watching the pendulum swing from sober living back over to addiction, but you're not with it that time. You're not riding the pendulum over that time. You're above it and you're watching that flow. And you may feel a certain stronger degree of temptation. I got to think that probably is the case. There probably is a time when we do feel a stronger sense of temptation to relapse than other times. And now that we know how the principle of polarity and the principle of rhythm work, now that we know that those times that we felt more tempted than others, that's probably when our pendulum is swung back over into the addiction side of things. But we're above it now. We're above it and we're looking down on it. And when we're doing that, we look down on it and we're like, okay, there it goes. It's swung over to the addiction side. I know this because I feel a stronger sense of temptation to do it. But now I'm aware of this, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to ride this out. And then there's other times where we feel, it's like there's times you say, I have never felt better about my sobriety. I've never felt more secure in my sobriety. I got to believe those are the times that our pendulum has swung back over to the sober living side. And really, if you want to go a little bit deeper with this and kind of apply it to your life, think back when you were in active addiction. And there were times where you were fully in addiction in every way possible. That's probably when your pendulum was fully swung over to the addiction side. Then there were other times when you were in active addiction, you were using, but you felt such a pull, that it was when you really felt fed up. It's when you really felt like, I just want to get sober. Those were the times when I got to believe that our pendulum was swung way over to the other side, to the sober living side. The only difference is we weren't aware of the fact that that was going on. We weren't aware of that, and we also didn't make any physical moves to rise above it. But we didn't know these things. And yes, the pendulum is just a metaphor. It's just a metaphor explaining the rhythms of life, the ebbs and flows. But everything in our life has rhythm. Everything from your breathing to the seasons, everything has a rhythm. And a lot of times we're completely unconscious to it. A lot of times we just watch it pass by. And we say, well, that's how it is. That's why I'm not a big fan of saying it is what it is. I mean, yes, things are what they are. I'll give you that. But that doesn't mean that we have to ride along with it. That doesn't mean we have to allow it to drag us back down with it. You see, sometimes it's good to just bear witness to the things that are going on around you. You don't have to get involved in it. Sometimes we can just observe. That's why sometimes it's good to just step outside yourself a little bit. Just step outside and just observe. Observe the things that are going on around you. If that big temptation comes along to relapse, just observe it, maybe acknowledge it, be like, yeah, that's there. Doesn't mean you have to do it. because you certainly don't. Now that you understand, that's just part of the rhythm. That's part of the rhythm of addiction. That's part of where I'm at with addiction. That means with my back and forth principle of polarity, that must be where my pendulum is swung currently. But I know that it will swing back over to the other side. And either way, I'm good. I'm just sitting here, sitting above it, watching. I was court ordered to rehab once. I had to sit in jail waiting for my bed to come open there. I was so angry. I was at that point where I was like, why can't people just leave me alone? Why can't I just do drugs and be left alone? Right? I was just so angry that I was sitting in jail and basically being forced to get sober. At that point, I would have relapsed in a heartbeat. In fact, I knew I would have because I pretty much said I would. But that's where my pendulum was at that time. My pendulum at that time was deep, deep, deep in addiction. Thankfully, I sat in rehab long enough to where, and I wasn't using, and I finally got clear-headed. So I sat in rehab long enough so that when it swung back over the other way, and I was clean and sober, and I had become conscious of the fact that those ebbs and flows do come and go. But that doesn't mean I have to ride along with it. Thankfully, I sat in rehab long enough to figure that out. Thankfully, they kept me there. So anyway, loved ones, that's kind of what I got. If you haven't read the Kybalion, it may or may not be for you. I mean, you can buy it on Amazon. I think it's like $9 just for the Kybalion, Kybalion. And it's a very good read. If you do pick it up, I would highly recommend skip through the intro and the appendix and all of these things. Just go ahead and cut right to the first chapter. You can go back and read all those other things later. It's just that it kind of takes a little bit of it's just better to go ahead and just jump straight into the book, because a lot of times those intros and all that kind of stuff and all that is just kind of forewords and things. Yeah, the foreword or the preface and the introductions and all of that. Sometimes those things are pretty boring, and sometimes they talk about things that we don't know yet because we haven't read the book yet. So and that's one of the books that I highly recommend you just skip that part, go straight to chapter 1. Just start at the beginning of the actual book itself. And then maybe go back and read those other things after the fact. That's fine. But if you haven't read the Kybalion, I recommend it. It may or may not be for you, but a lot of the things that I talk about are from Hermetic philosophy, such as the fourth principle and the fifth principle, polarity and rhythm. And inside the fifth principle, which is the principle of rhythm, there is that law of neutralization. That's the one where we become aware of the law of rhythm. We become aware of the fact that with regards to addiction, it's going to swing back and forth for the rest of our lives. As far as the state of our addiction goes, it's going to swing over into the more addiction side of it. And then there's other times it's going to swing more over to the sobriety side of it. In either case, we rise above it and we stay above it and we acknowledge it. Acknowledge the fact that those things happen. Anyway, loved ones, that is what I got. I hope you are, if you hear this around the Christmas time when I do release this, hope you're having a great holiday season. And like I said, I have taken the podcast here. I've taken that back to talking more about addiction. The YouTube channel is going to be more about my esoteric and metaphysical and weird stuff. That's where I'm going to do more of that. And the videos have been they've been fun. It has. So if you have not subscribed to me on there yet, I would greatly appreciate it. It's just Matt Stevens, MSA, as in my sober addiction, on YouTube. It's also on Rumble. And with the holidays and everything going on crazy, I have not written much of anything. But I do still have the Substack. But I have not posted anything on Substack in a pretty good while. Mostly been focusing on the YouTube and getting through these holidays. So there's that. Anyway, loved ones, that's what I got. I love you. I truly do. and I'll be back directly.
There is a distance in the light.